Hello, just checking everything. I'll be starting soon, just not right now. We have a couple minutes left to go. I'm going to start at 10:35, which is actually the start time for, well, if it's a 1 hour class, if it was a 1 hour class. So I'm assuming people are going to drift on in soonish. If I could ask for help, if you guys have any questions that you want clarified, this is a relatively, I'm assuming, but I've been wrong every other time. I'm assuming it's a relatively short lecture period that we're going to be doing. So I don't have anything really big to go over as far as I know. We're just going to be going over, information seeking, information, foraging, that sort of thing. Maybe databases, but I'm trying to avoid that because you guys, many of you know more about database design than I do. That's fine. But just how it all fits into everything. So, and then just share my screen, talk about P3 to ask about clarification for P2, that sort of thing. So if you have any questions about the assignments or things along those lines, just keep those in mind and we'll run through those one at a time in a minute from now.
Hello. So can we ask a question, for
Yeah,
example?
sure.
So I was reading homework 5 to see what we have to do for it and homework 6. So in homework 6, there is need for coding. And in 5, I mean,
There's
it
no
was
need for
also,
coding in 5.
no, in 6.
In homework 5 and homework 6, there's no coding whatsoever.
In 6, there is like write a code to do something. I was going through it
Oh,
like rush, but I saw something in homework 6 about coding something. Maybe
there's
I understood it wrong, but
maybe the encoding. We can always pull that up, but yeah, the let me see if I can make another, get rid of that. All right, so let's have a quick look. Okay. Individual homeworks, homework 6, dear data. There's animated transitions if anybody wanted to do it, if it was purely optional. If people were really excited. So again, this is when you're the curse of these scientific courses is that almost no matter what, if you're you have to plan in advance, even if a month in advance, without knowing what your students look like or are going to be, like who your students are. I should look like was the wrong term, but if you do not know who your students are, how do you design a course for the said students? Just like if you're designing a visualization or you're designing a system for people, how do you know if you're designing it right unless you know the task? You need to know your users, you need to know your tasks. So it is this term was a lot of you had to design blindly and then sort of figure it out. Dynamic visualizations. Oh, you're all right. I wanted to get rid of. Why is that showing up the wrong thing? It's even showing the wrong course if you hadn't noticed. I guess must not have fixed it. Dear Data Part 2, and then I'm just going to get rid of the other part. I don't think you need that at all. Great, we're just going to get rid of it all. I'm fixing it right now. Boom. And I will need to double check all this stuff afterwards.
So for the homework 5, it was like posting like postcards to
Hmm.
your PayPal or something. I didn't understand. I mean, the
So let
whole
me go
thing.
over that because I think that's a great question to go over. So let's, am I recording? Everything's recording. Great. So I did a little part of the video on that. I don't know if it was part of the, if you've already gotten to that part of the lecture videos yet for homework 5. So I think that might be in perception. I could talk about it, but it's going to be in one of the recorded videos as well. So it's coming up. I did that like weeks ago. Um, so the idea behind homework 5, and it's not due for a while because we have to do all the project stuff, is that the original thing works much better than what we have to do now. But the original is everybody makes a postcard, which is a unique visualization or visual representation of their data that they encounter in their on a weekly in during the run of a week. So it might be what books you read and where you read them. It might be where you showed thanks to people. It might be this, it might be that. The number of different prompts you can choose, where you saw different animals, things like that. But the key to it is it has to be something novel. You can't just do a line graph, right? You can't just do a pie chart. It has to be something kind of quirky and unique, and it has to be drawn by hand, not using a computer. So the idea is you're making a hand-drawn postcard that you might do a couple, you definitely should do a number of sketches about it beforehand. You're collecting data during the week. We're not double checking that you actually counted that many cats, but or whatever the thing you're counting, but you're trying to count numbers during the week, and then you make this postcard by hand, and then you would normally send it off to somebody. And I was putting an anonymous number on each person's thing, so you're sending it to someone in the class and you don't know who it is. So you can't just be, it can't be just your friends that you're sending the postcard to. It's someone, and they don't know you, you don't know them, you don't know how much they know, you don't know what their background is.
Mhm.
And so you'd be taking a photo of that and submitting it to the Google Drive. It will just have a Google Drive where you, oh, actually, no, to see you learn. And then we're going to post, we're going to anonymize all your posts by giving the to and from numbers. Like you have a number, the person you're sending it to has a number. So we'll make a Google Drive folder with all the different postcards. And then you, for homework 6, you grab the postcard addressed to you and you critique their visualizations and give them feedback.
Mhm.
Now, in previous terms, like last term for my Viz class, I did this twice. We did 2 different batches of the Dear
Mhm.
Data project because, well, first of all, they liked it more than when I was teaching it to to a bunch of data science students at Northeastern, they hated this project. And then I gave it to the students here, and they loved this project. The difference is the data viz students wanted to programmatically solve all their problems. They didn't want to have to be drawing things by hand and getting crayons and pencils and stuff out. And you're like, no, that's how you know you did this design well. You're not just throwing things at it. It's not just, I use the predefined pretty colors that Tableau gave me and I use this, right? It's thinking through the design outside of the technological aspect of it. And so the Dear Data project is just meant to be, can you be creative? Can you sort of explore how you can design something in a nice, novel way, but still conveying the information and have another person critique it? Because critiquing a visualization, critiquing how someone presents information to you is also part of the skill set we're playing with here. So does that answer your question, hopefully? And there's in the lectures themselves, there's a whole bunch of discussion of and examples of, there's a bunch of examples of what these things should look like, including the one I made based off of my kids' video games, and there was another one by Cody Dunn who was what his newborn child was eating. Actually, the books he was reading to his newborn child, but the child was eating them. Things like that. Whether he was picking the books off the floor and reading them, how many times he read them, that sort of thing. So it's meant to be kind of fun and unexpected. So I'm open to ideas. I'm giving a bunch of prompts because you sort of want an apples to apples comparison. But if somebody has a particularly cool thing they want to visualize in their daily life, that it's not just, you know, oh, well, I do this for my job anyway, so I already had the numbers. No, I want you to actually be paying attention to things during your week. Um, but if there's something really, really cool that you never thought about, how many political ads you got, if you were living in the States, things like that. I mean, that would be something that you could visualize in a different way. All right. So I'm open to maybe adding a couple other prompts that we can give to everybody else. But right now, there's a number of prompts that I've given in the slides, and then I'm also going to post on Piazza when the time comes closer. All right. How are people doing? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I want an answer to that or not. So let's share my screen here for a second. All right. So that was Dear Data. The reason I'm asking this is because, we're all sort of freaking out to a certain extent. I know I am. I have been every single week this entire term. So I know homework for the other programming assignment is due this. Was it already due? Yeah, okay. It was due this past Friday. P2 was due today, so that's your task analysis. Hopefully I have to read those. Obviously, I haven't read those yet. And today we're going to talk about P3 a little bit as well. And I'm just going to go over the in-class exercise, see what you guys came up with, and talk about some of just briefly go over what we're talking about for information retrieval and seeking. But most of this is actually in the lectures. I just like reiterating some points. So due today with assignment check-in, I wanted to see what groups were actually doing. So maybe we can go group by group. So the homework, by the way, I don't think many people did. I'm not sure how many people did the Jupyter Notebooks thing. I'm assuming most of the BIT students probably did that. But I wanted to see how your projects were progressing, if there was a major change in anyone's project so far, because we had, grandiose plans for P1. And as soon as you start looking at the task, was there something that shifted how you looked at things? I don't have a hands up thing. So if you could just start talking if you want. Any particular group that has any changes to their project.
Hi,
Hi, Eva.
this is Group C. So we have been looking for data since we did the last interview with you, but we were not that lucky in finding the most appropriate data that we are looking for. So we shifted little bit the idea of the our project into how did the COVID-19 impacted the CPI. I think let me just gather my papers. How did COVID-19 affected the economy and the GPI of Ottawa especially? So we wanted to talk to you about this topic.
That's a pretty big change. Group C was previously how are students handling COVID?
Online learning, yeah,
Online
during
learning.
COVID-19, yeah,
Okay, so that's a pretty radical change. I would love to chat with you guys about that and
yeah.
that's the kind of thing I wanted to check in on. That's why I'm asking. So great that
Okay.
you're asking about
We
that.
we find the data. We are good with the data, but yeah, we wanted to talk to you about the changing the topic.
Oh yeah, but I mean, your project now is something very, very different. No change in Space Invaders, no for Group A. Okay, wow, good for you guys. So yeah, the issue that we're going to have is when we were talking about this earlier, seeing how students deal with COVID, I was worried about the data mining side of Twitter being a problem or not being able to get the data. And so that's not unexpected or anything like that. But it does mean the task you're solving for, we have a different use. So your P2 data, the thing you got for P2 is different now,
Yeah.
right? If you're looking at um, gross domestic product GDP of for Ottawa, what who's using that?
Actually, we are trying to combine two things, the CPI and the GDP.
Okay, what's CPI, by the way?
Um, Let me grab my notes, please. So,
Maybe break it into English for people that are not business students, because we're going to talk about the ROI and all this kind of stuff. All right.
yeah, sorry, I didn't prepare my papers for the project.
It's all good. We might just need to take that offline because I don't know if the other groups need to have a big long discussion, but I would love to
Yeah,
chat with you guys because I think it's something to consider and to think about.
yeah.
Okay,
The CPI
consumer price index.
is the consumer price index, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you're going to be talking Greek to me essentially if you go hardcore into this, and that again, it's not the business analytics side of the project unless it is you're designing something for if you're designing something for business people to be worried about or the average consumer to be concerned about. They're different tasks, and the point of the course is not about the business like this whether the CPI went up or down. It's whether you can communicate that to other people or that people can find out certain patterns in your data, that sort of thing. So keep in mind that just as a sort of north star to your project, the thing that's directing you should always be, is this solving a problem? What's that person's task? Who are the people? What is their task? Design a system for that. The business use case and stuff like that, the business aspect of things, sure, have it in there, but I'm not measuring you guys based on that. I'm measuring based off of, are you solving the problem for somebody? And we know what the problem is, and we know what the task is, and we know who the people are.
Yeah.
Okay, just
Yeah.
I double check because I got to figure out what the CPI actually entails for in this particular case. It's the price for a consumer good and how it changes over time, right? Or maybe I'm completely wrong.
Yes, yes, and also it indicates if there is an inflammation in the economy, and yeah, it could indicate so many things, so many
Okay.
other things. Yeah.
And there's a price rot. I listen to a lot of Freakonomics podcasts about this sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
but okay. By the way, does any changes or do people have any concerns about the technological side of their projects? Right now that we have a task, now that you know what you're going to be doing approximately, maybe not Group C, we're still debating that sort of thing. Is there a technological side of your project that is a point of concern, or you just what the technological stack is and you're good to go? I think Group A knows where they wanted to go with. Great. You still have to figure out if you're doing one system or another, but you have people that know both systems. But I know there was a lot of groups that were concerned about the technological side of things, so I want to make sure that was all well and good.
Group B, we wrote this question down. It's more just specifically about P3 and how far, do we have to clean all of, because we pretty much have to do the whole back end in order to clean all of the data. Can we just clean a subset of the data to show how we plan to clean it? And
so the question is, if you're not cleaning up the entire back end, then you're not going to be able to can you run your system or whatever you're planning on doing with an unclean data set?
Yeah, well, we are planning to clean the back end. We just like to do it so the non-programmers can help with the cleaning too, and then we translate that into code so that we can kind of debate it back and forth.
Oh, and then you do like a script to do a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh. That's a good point, actually. So my view on this is always like scripts, fantastic if you can get them up and running. Don't spend 4 days to do a 2-hour job, right? Like if
Yeah.
manually cleaning it would take 2 hours, don't spend 4 days writing the script, which is a common computer science issue. Programmers love spending more time coding than actually cleaning. But if you can get a script to do all that stuff, I think there's still always going to be a certain amount of manual cleaning anyways. And yeah, and as a group, do a subset. But I'm assuming you would, what I didn't want is when you get to project 6 and project 7, you go, I'm going to look at my data. Oh, it's not clean yet. I would like to have this out of the way. If we can mark off a particular timestamp or a particular, because I'm assuming you're not doing live data. If you are, then we need to consider that as well. But I'm assuming we can if we are demarcating a particular time, a particular range, a window of data, right? If you clean that now, then you won't have to worry about it later in the future, like when you get to the end of the project. I don't, because having a moving target, having done this myself as a grad student, right? If you have a moving target, like you add more music to your music library and then you have to analyze that new music, or you add this to your data set and now you have to do more work, all this back end work again later on, it just means that there's more moving parts and there's more things that can go wrong. So if it makes sense, and chat with me as well about this if you want, outside of this, but I think it's good to bring it up now. Uh, if we can say, take this time period, even if it's like this month, and lock it down and say that's our data set, that's probably safer than trying to constantly ingest new information throughout the term, unless that's your project, right? But constantly ingesting new information and cleaning it on a regular basis throughout the entire term, and then potentially having new data coming in that ruins everything from before, right? I don't want new data in December to screw up your project.
Yeah, we're trying to decide which, because there's a lot of data in the Meetup API, and getting all of it, like it would be kind of ridiculous to deal with it in like an Excel sheet or something like that. So we're trying to choose kind of which classes and which specific attributes we want to grab.
Nice.
Because there's a lot. So we're just kind of.
So you can choose a subset of the attributes and the data. If there's stuff that it's a definite no-no, like you're definitely not going to use it, then I don't need to even know about it. And I'll pretend I didn't see anything and I'll pretend it doesn't exist. For things that you are more on the line and you're choosing, I'm going to use this attribute, but not this attribute. For things that are on the line, I would like to know that discussion why you chose to remove some things but not others. It's more this P3 is really just about you identifying the kind of data, what data you need, what data you want, and going through the process of cleaning it up. So if you were doing that, then I'm good with whatever you come up with, essentially. So if there's way too many attributes, you don't have to say what all those attributes are. Like if there's 4,000 attributes, no. But if there's like 10, 20 attributes, then labeling the attribute, what kind of data it is, and then trying to clean those attributes, that makes sense. Does that work?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, and I mean, if they're talking ridiculous size data sets, then I think we need a programmatic approach, but you would need that programmatic approach no matter what.
Yeah, well, we were just going to take a subset, but we just need to choose the approach to, like, are we going from the group, or are we going from the time, or are we going from like over from the events or from the group, are basically our two options. So we can get data either way.
I would do both. I would choose a number of groups that might be highly related to one another. So you had some very disparate sets, like data sets, and very disparate groups that we were looking when we were looking at your data set. You could choose a subset of that. You want it beefy enough that people think that they're actually looking at the data set, but I do not need the legitimate data set.
Okay.
If that makes sense. It needs to be at a scale that it looks realistic, but not at a scale that it's ridiculous for you to implement.
Okay, great.
Yep, great. By the way, you'll also be using Tableau to just visualize the data you're exploring, just so you can go like, look at this person over there, they gave me garbage data, or this thing is really out of whack. It is really this period of time, people, depends on the group of people. Some people go, well, this, why were we doing this? And it's like, well, no, this is the things you were supposed to do anyways. We're just making them formal. You're supposed to go through your data, look at it and go, I know that's ordinal data, therefore I'm going to approach it this way. Or this is continuous data, therefore I should approach it this way. This person is an outlier. How do I know they're an outlier? Because they're way the heck over there. How did I notice that they're way the heck over there? You probably had to visualize it anyways. I want to have you going through that process now rather than in December, and that's what this is for. In case you're wondering, what am I looking for? I'm looking for what you would have to do anyways for your project done early. That's it, right? And there's a formalization to writing up, showing me the visualization, but it's not anything like, I'm not going to be picking on your font size or the color scheme that you're using. I want you to play with your data, so I know that you've actually thought through your project, thought through what your data set looks like, thought through that it's clean or how you cleaned it. And every single project is going to be different, but it's you coming up with an approach that's going to be scalable, that's going to work so that it looks realistic, but it's not going to kill you when December comes around. You're not just drowning in technology and drowning in data that you can't deal with, right? So because I know that you would have your data scaled, ideally, but it's a 4-month project. It's not that much time. So, and removing outliers, you may have to do some of that manually, but you may also, depending on the data set you're looking at, or in other cases, you may have to just programmatically do it. So the programmatic side of things might be more difficult. So depends on the group. Does that make sense? So P3 is coming up, I think it's actually next week. So it's fast approaching. If you can't get through all the data perfectly clean, at least have the plan of attack, right? We are planning on making this script to clean the data this way. We are planning to remove the people that are more than 2 standard deviations out of the norm. And we visualize your data this way so that we found the idea that you've looked it over, you know what your plan of attack is. Okay, I'm leaving this to questions right now just to make sure if I can clarify anything for people. Does anybody have any questions about how we're doing P3? This is coming up quickly. It's right now where P2 was getting the task, but now it's cleaning up your data. And then the P4 is building up your back end. As far as I know, that's what P4 is. It is buildings like wherever your data is. Now that could just be, I have a database. It could be, I have a flat file that I'm reading in. It could be a lot of other things. But if you're doing some kind of Twitter ingestion feed, that's going to take some time. And therefore I want people getting ahead of this, working on it now, not in December. Wow, I really am not going to miss online teaching. Everyone's so quiet. I know you're muted, and everyone doesn't want to make an ass of themselves, but nothing.
Maybe people are freaking out in silence.
That's my fear.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay, so where are you freaking out in silence, if you don't mind me asking, Hata?
Oh, there are some part of it that we know, but there are many parts of it that we don't know. So, I mean, I'm freaking out, but I mean, are these part that we are doing for P1 to like P7 are like coming together for the last part, or I mean, do we get feedback and we have to change all parts for the last part? I
Okay, so P1 to P7 is the path to your final project. So if I give feedback, let's say your task is not well thought out. Let's say for P2, I say, oh my God, horrible task. You didn't listen to a thing I said. Just because I'm going to be mean in this example. then I would expect you to potentially either talk to me again and find out the task a bit more, or do something to try and course correct. This idea of all these deliverables is to have course correction along the way, because design is never this ballistic, I throw something over the fence, see what happens. It's an iterative process. So every time I do another project, you'll get feedback, you can make changes, you do the next part, you make feedback, you make changes. And a lot of this stuff is like data cleaning. You had to do anyways. I just formalized it as something, as a deliverable to keep people on a schedule, because otherwise people will try and do it in December and then ask for an extension. It's a forcing function to get people doing the work they had to do anyways earlier on. And so that they don't hope for the best, and then when they get to December go, oh, we don't know, no one knows how to code, oh, we're in trouble, right? Well, that's what I'm trying to avoid here. So you can expect to make course changes based on the feedback you get, but it's not, you wouldn't have to go back to the drawing board. The idea for these course projects, if you've never done anything like this with an instructor before, which kind of surprising if you hadn't, but I guess that maybe makes sense, is that it is guided discovery. It is not, you need to check off these 5 things. It is, you are going through the process that everyone goes through in a sort of a miniature version of the design process, but you're going through what you would actually go through. And therefore you're learning all the steps along the way. And therefore you're being graded on the process of discovery, not on your final product necessarily, or your final project deliverable. If something goes wrong with it, but you showed me that you were learning all the way along, you're doing fine. It's the learning that's you're being evaluated on. Which means, by the way, referring to things that are covered in lectures, during the lecture videos, or in a textbook, or something you researched online, referring to primary sources, or referring to content or theory is a critical thing. And it's not your opinion on things. You want to justify what you're doing. I have interviewed this task. We did this kind of task analysis. I found these patterns in what was discussed. Therefore, I concluded this. I can get on board with that. If you say, I think their task is this because I felt like it, I felt that was what their task was, that's not showing that you've actually gone through these steps, right? It's always justified. It's always empirically based, or it should be at least. There's some intuition, there's some creativity, but you back it up with empirical evidence. You back it up with theory. Okay. You don't really do that for data cleaning, but we'll talk about this in a second. So I somewhat briefly talked about information access, how we access information. So things like information foraging, information seeking, and information retrieval. 3 completely different things, but they're very interrelated. And a survey showing patterns. I even gave you a little survey paper to read, and hopefully you guys had a chance to read it. I strongly recommend reading it. It's big, it's long, but it discusses some of the interesting parts of it. So the big takeaway for me is that there's no real solution when it comes to information seeking behavior, how we actually do things. It's actually a way more nuanced, convoluted thing than you might expect. And so, like, at what point in time do you ask for peer advice? At what point in time do you go to original sources? At what point in time do you go to prior experience? At what point in time do you go to some like an online resource, or go to primary, something like a digital library? Wouldn't be surprised if many of you discovered this and may not have realized it. So when you were, for those of you that were freaking out about homework 3, you went through this, you may not have realized it. When you were going through homework 3 and you went, what the hell does this bug mean? What does this Anaconda error, installation error message mean? Why can't I get this thing up and running? Your job, you had this rough, not exact, at least it probably didn't seem exact at all to you guys, description of the problem, right? Something bad happened, something blew up. If you're trying to solve that and you're not, don't have a programming background, how do you solve that? That's actually what we were hitting again and again. That's the reason it's so scary. It's the reason why this entire project can be so scary, because you do not know what the final answer is. It's an open information seeking task that you're doing. And when do you talk to your friend who knows how to program? When do you go to Google to look for an answer? When do you just try to do it on your own, or go from previous experience from that little bit of, some coding class you did in the past? So if you wanted an example of this in action, homework 3 was one of those examples. So I like the fact, and I got a bunch of people giving me this, so that's fantastic. I want to look at what you guys came up with. The 80% of the data scientist's time is spent cleaning data. I'm going to go get the Google Drive document now. Look at the Google Drive, and there we go. And let's see. I'll just run down the list here. So, Adrian, if you want to unmute, what did you see? What did you find? Oh, can you walk me through this? If Adrian's on the phone, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I just have to exit the full screen from screen sharing really quick, just so I can pull up for myself. So I just kind of grabbed a few different links. I found that there were quite a few links that talked about this problem when you search it up. So I didn't want to take kind of everything. But the thing I guess I found I tried to keep it also based, like this one's from IBM. I tried to keep them based either from like reports or like tech fields, because there were some that I went through on a Google search that were just random blogs talking about it. So I wasn't sure about necessarily like the credibility of that. And then I guess something that a lot of them talked about when they were discussing like the 80% is just gathering data. I noticed that a lot of it was, they would say the 80% is gathering, but also cleaning and also organizing and also this and also that. So I thought that was interesting, because I guess the original question made it sound like that 80% was just that one single task, and it's actually a lot of different tasks put together. And just saying that 80% makes it seem larger than it is. It's probably like a much smaller percentage is just gathering, versus a much smaller percentage is just cleaning and stuff.
Okay, trying to continue. Okay, I'm just seeing. So how do we know that it's 80%?
That's also the thing. That's why I tried grabbing a report versus a lot of those blog posts, because I found that a lot of the blog posts would say, oh, people say that it's only this, but it's actually this. So the IBM's, maybe the IBM site, and then some places cited this report. So
there's a New York Times part.
Yeah,
it
was an interesting task to try to kind of find different sites that talked about this.
And I love the fact it's called data janitor work, which is sort of, if it was really data janitor work, you wouldn't need somebody with, a PhD to do this kind of thing. It seemed, or a master's degree, or whatever the degree program that you have for it. You're right. It's not just, you can't just get anybody off the street to come in here and clean data for you properly, right? It requires a certain domain knowledge. So the fact it's so condescending just pisses me off. But let's see what other things you got. So so now my question is, how did you search for that? Like, you just found a bunch of reports. Were the first links you found, or was it a Google search? What did you do?
So I started with the Google search, where I just put in the question, and then based off that, I read a few different articles, and then I would go through maybe not all of them, but the majority of their sources or anything they link to as well. And then I would kind of pull out any keywords. So like data cleaning, like 80%, or looking up data analyst kind of not really job postings, but kind of some things that discussed the typical roles. So I had a lot more sources. These were just kind of like the first 4 that led to other kind of avenues. So
nice. And of course, how often do you actually go into those sources when you actually do a search yourself?
Oh, very rarely.
Okay,
Very rarely.
so just
Yeah.
for this, huh?
Yeah. Unless it's something I'm really trying to find like a particular answer and I need kind of the source for, or the source. But in terms of like for the homework 3, for instance, when we're getting errors and bug errors, kind of, you're not necessarily going through all the sources. You just want that quick answer right away.
So it also depends on the question being asked and the level of thoroughness that you want. I'm going to pick randomly lower down just because, Tina, I'm going to pick on you. There you go. All right. So Tina, walk me through. You got 3 links in here.
Hi. Yes. First of all, I go through Google and I search the phrase, and after that, I just saw what links are more trustful. For example, IBM was the one which is, I think, I can trust IBM, and I just read the articles, and some of them have references. I go through the references and something like crawling the references and
Oh, there's
just
this one again, InfoWorld. Okay.
yeah.
So why do you trust IBM?
Maybe because this is a very big company in computer science.
It's a big company. I know people that work for them and would not trust them. Nice. And then we have this blog post. Okay, that I was reading as well. Various surveys, Crowdflower, nice. And
Yeah, they
Crowdflower
have
is
some surveys, yeah.
and the Kaggle survey as well. Okay, let's see. And let's see if I can get one more. Anyone who want to volunteer?
I would volunteer.
Sure. All right.
So what I did was, I mean, to save time, I was looking at the blogs or the posting that had like visuals in them to minimize time of processing and reading. So I always do that. When I search something, I always go through the ones that have something so that I can just see, are they the ones that I want to look at or not? So that is why I put some of the visuals in my report. And one of the other thing that I did was, so it was like Google search, and because I wasn't even sure what 80-20% was about and the origin, I started looking at what is the origin and where did it came from, and that's why I put a little bit notes in there. And then there was something really interesting in one of them, but that was saying that like 80% or more, no, 90% of the data that we have came from, were gathered in the last 2 years. So that it was talking that there are lots of data that are gathered because of the sensors and everything. And that's why lots of them are like not usable or they're not even in the domain that you want. And it was looking at the processing and cleaning from another perspective. So like you said, it's not the janitor's job to do it. So the data scientists have to have a really good data to work with. So if the data is rubbish, the answer is rubbish as well. So this is like a critical part of it. You shouldn't say, for example, it is 80% and it's taking long time, but it is the actual job that you have to do before like going through judgment and everything. So that was interesting for me, and I don't see it like 80-20. And they were talking about some tools that were invented. So the 80% is like coming less and less towards less than 50% now. So you cannot say it's 80-20, it's like less than 50 right now. And I mean, and in even looking at the time is not the right approach, because you cannot say, I mean, for everyone it is the same thing. The actual thing that matters is that you have a really good data at the end. So the goal matters, not the time. So that's what what I understand about the
It's good
whole idea.
understanding. So 2 different questions for people. How many people used, is it Bing? Yeah, it's Bing, isn't it? How many people used a search engine other than Google? Okay, that leads us to information foraging.
Sometimes
Oh,
I
nice.
use Yahoo.
Okay, Yahoo. Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
but that's not intentional, like, because my laptop. But anyways, I use the links that come up with it. Yeah, I don't know why sometimes, like, when I search in Firefox, and then it goes with the Yahoo search engines.
The
Yeah.
default search
Anyways,
engines.
I use it. Not really bad, but
So
not the best.
it was, you guys probably weren't even alive when the original search engines were all, vying for attention. Then Google came out and everyone went, oh, it's not just all porn sites. Oh, that's great. People suddenly went, as soon as Google became better, demonstrably better than these other search engines, suddenly everyone just shifted over and they just didn't go back. And that's a huge, we'll talk about that for information foraging. Firefox sometimes, it sometimes defaults to that, yeah. Or Jeeves and a bunch of other things as well, or DuckDuckGo, if you're using a Raspberry Pi, it turns out. So it's the interesting thing I find about this is, so that's one, where do you get your most bang for your buck? Why do you choose a particular path? Why did you choose that path? Why did you choose that link, right? And think about what you did for all these cases. The other part I like to point out is the famous proverb, which is a picture's worth 1,000 words. I love bringing this up. It's a classic in my field. So where does that come from? Does anyone know? Don't do a Google search because you'll spend another 20 minutes looking at that as well. According to this thing, it's an ancient Chinese proverb, except it's not at all. It was for a bus campaign in New York City, honest to God. But at the time in the 1930s, when this thing came out, when this thing was a picture's worth 10,000 words or something like that, it was a bit bulkier as an expression. And it said on the bus sign that it's an ancient Chinese proverb. It says it's an ancient Chinese proverb because at the time, ancient Chinese proverbs were all in vogue and cool and look ancient Chinese wisdom kind of thing at the time. And so they just were jumping in on a trend. That was it. Some guy just came up with the idea for a marketing campaign and it stuck in society and everyone goes, it's an ancient Chinese proverb. It's not an ancient Chinese proverb. But that's one of the reasons why I like bringing these sorts of things up, because conventional wisdom is not actually always correct. The rule of thumb, you may have heard various random things where the rule of thumb comes from. They're all bogus. No one actually knows. I did a lot of research on this, right? It's one of those things that it just sort of takes a life of its own. And where do you get your original sources? Where do you find information? How do you trust the person that's saying something? Because you will see people online say, the 7 plus or minus 2 rule, or for number of objects you can remember, or you'll talk about the 80-20 rule, and people will take it as faith, or they'll take it as absolute truth versus it's an approximation. And that's something that I wanted to bring up for you guys. Very nice work, by the way, guys. I'm not going to go through everyone's stuff because it's 11:19 already. But I want to just I wanted to bring up that. So that was really well done. Nice. For me, at least. So let's see if I get this up. All right. So what links do we find? How do we refine our search? It is an iterative process. You don't know where you're going to go. You sort of dive in, you explore things, you find some keywords, and then you figure, like Adrian was pointing out, you find some keywords that might be useful in the search later on, and then you do another search. It's over and over. It's an iterative process. That's information seeking. And same with coding. If you don't know what you're doing with coding, there's a whole lot of process of figuring out what you need. I went through the same process figuring out what we could do for the assignments because I didn't know what technology to use for this class. Should I be using Jupyter Notebook? Should I be using straight Python? Should I be using Anaconda? Should I be using this? Should I be using that? You can go on forever. It is both a wide and a deep search tree, if you know what a search tree is. Imagine like a tree, like a family tree. It's really, really wide, a whole lot of options, and it goes really, really deep. You can deep dive into any of these things for a while. That's why it's a hard task. That's why no one has a definitive rule for how you do it. And that's why, depending on how much time you have, you either talk to your colleagues to prune the search tree quickly, or if you want to be absolutely confident that you're correct, than you have to do for primary search references. They're different techniques. Information foraging, by the way, this is why you won't jump to Google, because you expect that's where the information lives. That's why you go to Stack Overflow if you're a programmer. That's why you go to the ACM or IEEE if you want primary sources. It's where you think you're going to get the most bang for your buck, where all the information lives. Your information sent is the text, the title of these links is your information sent. It is, if I'm sniffing out some piece of information, that little bit of text tells me something. The images, for in Hasna's case, gives me something, right? It lets me seek out useful information. And we'll see other examples of this later on, where we can actually, color our line graphs to give us more information. And your information diet is a third idea, which is how much bang for your buck you get. The idea is a line doesn't eat bugs for a reason. It can't eat enough bugs in a reasonable amount of time, and probably doesn't have the digestive tract for it, but to get enough nutrients to survive. A human doesn't hunt bears until later on in history, or it was rarer, because they tend to eat us, right? You want the thing that doesn't kill you, but you eat, and you can survive on it. That's what the information diet is. We're looking for where we go to get the most information. Why I go to Google and Stack Overflow first, because it's going to get me the most of the way there. I can search another thing later, but I want to get the most bang for my buck. Okay. Information retrieval, however, is what a librarian does. It's actually what Google's based around, which is what's really kind of frustrating, right? How do I know where something is? How do I know where the Google Drive is for the various posts? How do I find this? How do I find that? Give me this particular research article. When I do a Google search, it's designed for put in a text box, get information. It's a straight retrieval. It's not meant to be this ambiguous, nebulous task. So it's a different thing. And when we were talking about information seeking, that's what I was trying to do with this, but you guys made it information retrieval because you traced down what was needed really quite quickly. I was very impressed on the very first lecture, right? If I go to a hardware store though, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I have to talk to someone, try and prune my search space, and I have this iterative process of every time I get a new computer, same thing. I have to do a lot of work to get up to speed on the topic, and then I can ask meaningful questions, but not beforehand. So, so this is what I thought you'd do. Okay, information retrieval versus seeking. I like to point out, if you have a chance to look at this, I just like this video, or not, you actually show the video. But things like walkscore.com, pretty much anything you look online right now, anytime where when you start searching for something, you move a slider around and everything updates automatically, that's a dynamic query. That changes everything, and people don't realize how much of a change it was. Until, can someone give me an example where you don't have this, where you have to push search, right? You do something, it's supposed to be like this dynamic query where you're changing some values, but you still have to go to the bottom and go search. Does anyone have an example of that?
Google.
Google, you just type a message though, and then press search, versus like setting up 5 different fields and then pressing search. Let's see here. Forms, what forms though?
Like when we were searching for the Meetup API, there was lots of fields we had to fill, like groups, I don't know, URL, location.
The Meetup API is a great example of that too.
Yeah.
Yep. I thought you guys would have been chomping at the bit to give this as an example. I'm assuming most stuff from Carleton Central is this crap, right? Every time I have to find a class, I have to put in like 20 different fields and then press go, and then I go, oh, I put it in wrong. Go back, check things out again, right? It's this big, really heavyweight operation. You'll notice when you start cursing at a form field and how slow it is to find something, it's because it's not a dynamic query. And that's the comparable difference. Okay, I wanted to there's 1 or 2 other things I wanted to go over, make sure we're fine. So I just liked it as a metaphor, right? The finding out who the killer is very different than just checking what the fingerprint match is. There's a whole lot. You do not know what the end result is. And so that's what we're looking at. Did anyone have any problems with the databases stuff? Did it make sense what I was trying to point out when it comes to databases? So my big takeaway on all of this database stuff is some people say, should I use a relational database? Should I use a NoSQL database? So a non-relational database, if you will, like Mongo, for example. Should I use just some flat file? And I'm hoping it doesn't. Okay, there you go. A lot of profanity in that video. Or should I just use some flat file? And the answer is, what's best for you? If you know how to set up a Mongo database, go for it. If you know how to set up a SQL database, a SQLite database, and access it, go for it. If you don't know how to do any of those things, stick with a flat file at first and then figure it out. But the idea is that I'm not worried about the database side of things. It's important, but I'm worried about sort of streamlining your process for your project. And so, yes, really bad pun in there. But if you know any of these technologies, great, show off. That's fantastic. I like to show you people, because I didn't actually have this in my other thing. This is an example of a JSON file, right? If you've never actually opened up one, it actually will encode everything you need for a particular object in programming object, if you will. So this would be, so I'm all the way down here. This would be one particular row, or the one particular row would be an object. It has a feature. It has a bunch of properties, which includes whether it exists, what the existing path is, existing Y, when it was started, the year that it started, the length of the actual path. I think it even has a path series of coordinate points to define the path. So, but these are going to be big, big files. And as you might imagine, if it's just a text file like a JSON file is, it can be slow to load. So if you're talking about colossally large data sets, you may need to go to something like a database. If you don't, if you have a relatively small number, great, just flat file will work. A JSON file reads in quite nicely. As far as I know, JSON files read in quite nicely for dealing with Altair and Jupyter notebooks if you're going to go with that. I think they read in quite nicely, or comma separated value files, reading quite nicely for Tableau if you're using Tableau. It depends on the task you're doing. The big takeaway is, what do you need from your task? If you're not doing something really crazy, I wouldn't do something like a NoSQL database. Oh my God, it's still going. I wouldn't do something like a NoSQL database. I would do something like either a relational database, which I show an example of in the lecture, or I'd go with something like a flat file and just keep it simple, at least for the time being. We're 2 minutes over, 3 minutes over. Can I unpack any of this, or does anybody have any questions? I also have office hours immediately after this, so. No chat thing, let's see. We have one chat thing, I think. Okay, good. Good to go, all right. So I'm gonna let you go from here. Next week, we will be looking at, what are we looking at next week? It's perception. I'll be posting some more lectures online as well. And then we're going to move on to more the front end side of things very, very soon. So things like visualizations, like human perception, how we think about through problems and stuff like that. But I want to make sure that you're feeling comfortable with the back end side of things. So please ask questions when they come up as a group. I want you guys to hopefully reach the problems that you might have with your system earlier rather than later. So please just keep me informed about this. There is no one right project. There's no one right answer. So it's information seeking, right? So I would like to be in the loop if you have any questions as they come up. All right. No additional messages. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and I will let you guys go on about your day. So just keep me informed if there's any changes in your project or anything like that, if you have any questions.
Yeah, I have.
Right. Oh, sure.
Okay. Regarding the homework, right? I had some difficulty in programming. So should I reach the TA?
If you had trouble with the programming, you can either punt on it altogether. We're not counting 2 of the homeworks, right, out of the 6.
I know.
But
I want to know.
reaching the TA is probably the best bet because he has more more experience with Python, I think, than I do. We could still also help with that. If your problem was Vega Lite, there was a Vega Lite bonus problem. I think that you reached out to me about it, but I think you solved that on your own, as far as I know.
Then I faced another 2 issues regarding that.
Okay. So I think reaching out to TA is probably your best bet, but I can also try and help you out as best I can.
Okay, so I message on Piazza.
Piazza, you also have his email as well, and he can always escalate it to a Zoom meeting if he needs, if you want to chat directly.
Okay.
Right? Yes, take advantage of the TA. He knows what he's talking about, so take advantage. Other questions?
Thank you.
All right, I think we're good to go. Thanks, everyone. I will talk to you soon. Cheers.
Bye.